Donald Trump has just made a move that could shake the foundations of global pharma, and India is watching closely.
And Carney's trip to the UK also saw him talk a bit about CUSMA, the Canada-U.S. Mexico Agreement that is set to be jointly reviewed by the countries next year.
From the 1st of October this year, the United States will impose a 100% tariff on branded and patented medicines imported from abroad.
Prime Minister Mark Carney traveled to New York with a simple request: spare Canada from the latest round of U.S. tariffs. He met with President Trump to discuss relief for Canadian pharmaceuticals, heavy trucks, and furniture industries already struggling under economic pressure. Trump's response was equally simple: no, the tariffs stand. 100% on pharmaceuticals, 25% on heavy trucks, 30% to 50% on furniture and cabinets. This isn't just about trade policy or abstract economic theory. These tariffs will directly affect the price of medicine, the cost of housing, and thousands of Canadian jobs. Today we're breaking down what these tariffs mean, why Trump imposed them, and what options Canada has as the CUSMA trade agreement comes up for review. Let's start with what Trump actually announced. 4 major tariff categories, all taking effect October 1st. Pharmaceuticals, 100% tariff. This doubles the cost of imported drugs from the United States. Given that Canada imports billions of dollars worth of medications annually, much of it from American suppliers or through U.S. distribution networks, this is potentially catastrophic for healthcare costs. Heavy trucks, 25% tariff. These are the big rigs that form the backbone of North American logistics. This tariff affects both Canadian truck manufacturers and the integrated supply chains that span the border. Upholstered furniture, 30% tariff. This hits manufacturing sectors concentrated in Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba, industries that employ tens of thousands of workers. Kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, 50% tariff. At a time when housing costs are already sky high in Canada, this makes renovation and new construction even more expensive. Trump justified these tariffs using Section 232 of U.S. trade law, the national security provision. His administration argues that maintaining domestic production capacity in these sectors is essential to American security and economic independence. Critics argue this stretches the definition of national security beyond recognition. Regardless, it gives Trump broad legal authority to impose these measures unilaterally, even within the framework of existing trade agreements. Of all these tariffs, the 100% duty on pharmaceuticals is the most immediately alarming. Canada's healthcare system relies heavily on imported medications. Unlike European countries that invested in building robust domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing, Canada chose to lean on international supply chains and negotiated pricing agreements. This strategy worked well for decades. It kept costs relatively low and ensured access to a wide range of medications. But Trump's tariff exposes the vulnerability of this approach. When you double the cost of imported drugs overnight, the effects cascade through the entire healthcare system. Hospitals face budget strain. Many already operate on tight margins. A sudden doubling of drug costs means difficult choices about what treatments to offer and how to allocate limited resources. Patients with chronic conditions are at risk. People who depend on regular medications for diabetes, heart disease, cancer treatment could face shortages or rationing. Some analysts have warned about potential black market activity as people desperately seek affordable access to vital medications. Seniors on fixed incomes are particularly vulnerable. When medication costs spike, those with the least financial flexibility suffer most. The pharmaceutical industry has been warning about Canada's import dependence for years. Building domestic manufacturing capacity would take years and require massive investment, infrastructure that simply doesn't exist yet. Carney specifically asked Trump for exemptions on medical supplies and pharmaceuticals, pointing out that these aren't luxury goods but essential healthcare products. Trump refused. The other tariffs may seem less urgent than the drug crisis, but they're still significant. Trucking. The 25% tariff on heavy trucks disrupts one of the most integrated sectors of the North American economy. Canadian truck manufacturers supply parts to U.S. assembly lines. American trucking companies operate routes across Canada. The border for this industry has been essentially invisible for years under NAFTA and then CUSMA. This tariff redraws those lines. Higher costs for logistics companies mean higher prices for everything transported by truck, which is nearly everything. Job losses in Canadian plants that supply the U.S. market are likely. Furniture and cabinets. These industries employ significant numbers of workers in specific regions. A 30% to 50% tariff effectively prices Canadian products out of the U.S. market. Manufacturers face an impossible choice: absorb losses they can't afford, find new markets they haven't developed, or close their doors. For Canadian consumers, these tariffs also feed into housing costs. Builders and renovators who relied on cross-border supply chains now face higher prices for cabinets and furniture, costs that get passed directly to homebuyers and renters. The timing couldn't be worse. Canada is already dealing with a housing affordability crisis. Adding thousands of dollars to the cost of furnishing or renovating a home compounds the problem. To understand these tariffs, you need to understand Trump's core economic philosophy: America first. From Trump's perspective, the U.S. has been taken advantage of in trade relationships for decades. He views trade deficits as evidence of unfair deals and sees tariffs as a tool to level the playing field. For pharmaceuticals, Trump argues that America should not be dependent on foreign supply chains for critical medications. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in global supply networks, and Trump has made reshoring manufacturing a priority. For trucks and manufactured goods, the argument is about protecting American jobs and industries from foreign competition. Trump has also used tariffs strategically as leverage in negotiations. By imposing harsh measures, he creates incentives for trading partners to make concessions in other areas. Whether you agree with this approach or not, it's consistent with Trump's track record. During his first term, he renegotiated NAFTA into USMCA, CUSMA in Canada, using similar tactics, walked away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum. His message to Carney was clear: these tariffs serve U.S. interests, and Canada getting caught in the crossfire is not his concern. This brings us to Canada's dilemma. Carney is trying to pursue trade diversification, strengthening relationships with the UK, signing a new deal with Indonesia, preparing for the CUSMA review. He's framing this as building resilience so Canada isn't completely dependent on the US market. The problem is asymmetry. Canada sends roughly 75% of its exports to the United States. The U.S. sends less than 20% of its exports to Canada. Canada needs the U.S. market far more than the U.S. needs Canada's. That asymmetry limits Canada's leverage. Retaliatory tariffs would hurt Canadian consumers and industries at least as much as they'd hurt Americans. Walking away from CUSMA entirely would be economically catastrophic for Canada. Trade deals with the UK or Indonesia are helpful at the margins, but they don't replace the scale and integration of the US-Canada economic relationship. You can't quickly reroute 75% of your exports to entirely new markets. The infrastructure, relationships, and logistics simply don't exist. Building domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing, developing alternative supply chains, and reducing dependency on U.S. markets are all worthy long-term goals, but they take years or decades to implement. The crisis is immediate. Hospitals need medications now. Workers in affected industries need paychecks now. Canadians shopping for homes need affordable materials now. Carney's challenge is explaining why long-term strategy matters when short-term pain is so acute. The CUSMA trade agreement is up for review next year, and these tariffs set an ominous tone for those negotiations. Canada has already launched public consultations, seeking input from communities, businesses, and industry leaders about what to prioritize. The goal is to secure stronger protections against exactly this kind of one-off sectoral tariff fight. But Trump's willingness to use Section 232 national security justifications means even a renegotiated agreement might not prevent future unilateral action. For Canada, the stakes are enormous. This review isn't just about fine-tuning trade rules. It's about whether Canada can secure reliable access to its most important market without constant vulnerability to sudden policy shifts. The pharmaceutical tariff, the trucking disruption, the furniture industry crisis, these are all symptoms of a deeper reality. Canada's economic model relies heavily on stable, predictable access to American markets. When that stability vanishes, the vulnerabilities become painfully clear. The question now is whether Canada can negotiate from a position of strength, or whether Trump's tariffs have already demonstrated how little leverage Ottawa actually has. Trump's tariffs are reshaping Canada-U.S. relations in real time. What happens next will determine not just the fate of specific industries, but the broader economic future of the relationship between these two countries. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.